All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome you here to this town hall meeting. We are in Seldovia, Alaska. Those of you that are joining us via Zoom, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to take part in this meeting. I will introduce our panel in just a few short minutes, but some housekeeping. As we go through this, I had hoped that you would be able to hear us clearly enough. Hopefully the microphones that we are using will allow you on Zoom land to hear us. If there is any problem with the audio, or if you're not able to let us know, please use your chat feature and give us the heads up, and we'll do what we can on this end. Sometimes it may be just as simple as turning up the volume on your own speakers so that you can hear us. But the meeting is for you, and we want to make sure that you can hear us. I'd like to introduce the panel that's going to be here speaking. To my far right in Alaska State Trooper uniform is Sergeant Dan Cox. Sergeant Cox will give us some introductory comments about his role with the Alaska State Troopers, a little bit about himself and where he is currently stationed in some of his assignments. Sitting next to him is Seldovia Police Chief Clayton Hawkins. And we're certainly welcome I'm glad that he's able to take part in this town hall. And he too, during his opening comments, will be able to let you know a little bit more about who he is and how long he's been here in Seldovia. I'd also like to thank the city of Seldovia for facilitating this meeting, for making it come about. Thank you for promoting dialogue between the members of your community and the law enforcement community. Partnering together, we can certainly do great things to make our respective communities safer and a better place to live. So thank you, City of Seldovia, for putting this on. I'd also like to thank the AMLJIA that facilitated me to be able to be here. I'm their police consultant, and I'd like to tell you just a quick bit about who I am and why I am here in this role. I began my law enforcement career nearly 50 years ago. That's right, more than a half a century ago. I was introduced to law enforcement, perhaps in a way that maybe you were too. I can remember my first contact with law enforcement. I had my driver's license for 4 days, and I thought that the police would be impressed by the way I was driving, but they took exception to my high-speed tactics driving in a rural neighborhood, and I was stopped. Can you imagine an event that is so life-changing that you can remember it 50 years? Well, that was my introduction to law enforcement. And fortunately, it was a good contact. I did get a ticket, and I well deserved it. But the officer did something that was a little bit different than maybe the norm. I got the ticket, but I also got the warning that he would follow up by contacting my parents. But he would give me an opportunity to go straight home and to tell my parents. I thought he was bluffing until the phone rang. And then I quickly told my mom, oh, by the way, something you ought to know. But that was my introduction to law enforcement more than 50 years ago. It made a positive impact. Such is the role that law enforcement can have in each one of our lives and in our communities. I'm very glad that the state troopers are here. I'm very glad that Chief Hawkins is here. I believe that Captain Mo Hughes with the Alaska State Troopers Detachment Commander is also online. And I understand that we have the Chief of Police, Mark Robol from Homer, also in attendance as a spectator. All of these folks and their respective agencies are to be thanked for making our communities safer. The purpose of our meeting is to review how the Alaska State Troopers and the Seldovia Police Department work together to make sure that Seldovia and its citizens are safer and feel protected. In order for that to occur, these two agencies have to work together. Hope that as a conclusion of this meeting that there will be a better understanding of their respective roles and an increased trust and confidence on the public for the role that these two agencies provide to Seldovia. A couple of housekeeping rules. We're not going to be able to talk specifics about any ongoing cases or perhaps something that may be of specific interest to a particular family, to a particular individual, to something that is ongoing. I'm just going to give you the heads up that should a question come up like that where you're asking for a specific case update or briefing, That just is not going to happen. We're going to have to keep our comments and our questions in generalities. I'm confident there'll be plenty of questions to do that. So then with that, I would like to begin introductions. Chief Hawkins, would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Chief Clayton Hawkins. I've been with Seldovia. Was hired November 1st last year. Before that, so you guys get a little history of where I came from, my background. I started out actually law enforcement. I was a paramedic of all things, and I got my medical, and I wanted to take care of people. That's what I wanted to do. It wasn't even in law enforcement, it was in paramedicine. And once I got my paramedic, I realized that in where I was at in Utah, there was only 2 jobs that available. And I actually only knew of one. It was a fireman, actually. And I didn't really want to sit in a station and do that. And I looked up online and I found this job up in Davis County where they did paramedics and law enforcement. It was combined. And it really intrigued me that the fact that we could do that. And I'm out working and doing stuff and I love firemen. My brother's a fireman, but sitting in a station and, waiting, I like the idea of going out and being proactive and stuff and doing something. So I went and applied and got hired there, and took a little bit for me to convince my wife to let me start to do more stuff in there. Through that, I ended up being a trainer, training people. They call it a field training officer. I started to become a firearms instructor, and I finally convinced her to let me do SWAT, which I did for over 9 years. I also was at that time, went through the different programs in there as a sniper, and then the breacher, and then eventually team leader. Then I ended up going into the canine program too, running through the canines. But when I got promoted, it took me into a lot of different avenues. I got to go over into the narcotics unit, which was an undercover unit. I got to go over into the courts, see how the court system worked with the different judges and the bailiffs and all the different stuff. And eventually when they asked me near the end what I wanted to do, I asked him if I could go back into patrol. And that's where I ended my career and retired there. And when my wife, who I've been married to for 27 years, and now we have 3 kids, 2 of which are married and back in Utah and 1 here. We were talking about it, and we found this job, and it really intrigued us. It was just like we could go to a small community where we could be part of the community, make more of a difference and an impact instead of. And I loved it when I was in patrol back in Utah. I could go out, and I loved the morning times where I'd drive around and see people and talk to them. But I'd only get to see a few people because you see a lot, but you don't get. There's so many you didn't really feel like you're making an impact. But here I get to go out and I get to meet people, and that's just really intrigued us to come here. And when we came here to look at the job, it was just amazing. The community. We just loved the community, and we fell in love with it. And that's where I'm at now.
Thank you, Chief. Sergeant Cox.
Hello, my name is Dan Cox. I'm a sergeant with the Alaska State Troopers. I'm currently the Anchor Point supervisor. I've been here in Anchor Point since 2016. I started with the troopers back in 1997. Went to the academy, was stationed in Palmer for my first 2 years. After that, I transferred to Kodiak and spent 6.5 years down there, working a lot of the rural villages out of Kodiak. Spent a lot of time working with and training and getting involved in the VPSO program while I was down there. After Kodiak, I transferred to Cooper Landing, where I spent 5 years. I promoted to sergeant about halfway through that. After Cooper Landing, I went back up to the Valley, where for a couple of years I ran one of the Bureau of Highway Patrol traffic teams. For a couple of years, went back to patrol, spent 3 more years back in patrol, and then I transferred down here. throughout my career, I've always been patrol, and spent a lot of time, most of my career working in places where we had outlying communities that we had to police off the road system, and working quite a bit with the VPSO program. So that's kind of an overview of my career so far.
Thank you, Sergeant Cox. Captain Hughes, are you online?
Yes, sir, I am. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself to the folks in attendance, please?
My name is Maurice Hughes. Everyone calls me Mo. I'm the captain here for the Kenai Peninsula 8 Detachment. My office is in Soldotna. I've been with the troopers for quite a few years now. Started in the Soldotna area back in 1990. Worked there for a while. Left Soldotna area, went up into the interior of Alaska, worked in Delta Junction, that area on the highway south of Fairbanks between there and Tok. Worked there for, I think, 4 years. Moved from there, promoted to sergeant down to Kodiak. Sergeant Cox and I worked down there together. I was down there for 9.5 years. As he's pointed out, certainly we had a lot of the rural issues, both villages that we covered as well as roadways. I left Kodiak, went to headquarters in Anchorage, where I ran the recruitment unit for a while, recruiting new troopers. I left that position, went to the courthouse, the courthouses. I oversaw the judicial service unit for 7 years, Anchorage Courthouse. Left that, went back to oversee some rural Alaska areas, to include Kodiak, the Dillingham, Bristol Bay area, Nome, Kotzebue, and out as far as Dutch Harbor. Did that for a year and a half or so, and then I was promoted to captain, and I've been here on the Kenai Peninsula as the detachment commander since 2016, I think it is. So I have responsibilities here, also have responsibilities for Southeast Alaska. I oversee those areas that include Juneau, Ketchikan, and Prince of Wales Island. So I'm happy to be here. Hopefully this will promote some good questions. We'll try to answer them to the best of our abilities. It's the things that we do as law enforcement officers. I know some people don't understand, and we'll try to answer some questions as best we can. There certainly are some challenges working in rural Alaska areas that are off the road system, and we'll try to answer those questions and see if we can, articulate what we do well and what we still have challenges with. Thanks, Greg. And Greg and I worked together for quite a while back in the early days here in Soldotna.
Thank you, Captain. I remember when you first came to Soldotna, and congratulations on such a good and forward career. I'm grateful that you're here. Chief Roble is from Homer PD, and although not a panelist, I understand he might be online. Chief Roble, are you here? Going once, going twice.
Let's try that.
We can hear you now, Chief. Go ahead.
Yeah, name is Mark Roble. I started with law enforcement with the Homer Police Department in 1984. My entire career has been spent here in Homer. I was promoted to chief in 1999, and I have held that position since then. As Seldovia's closest neighbor, we often end up working together on various issues that cross our borders, and we are happy to support Seldovia and Seldovia's residents in any way that we can. And I look forward to listening in on the rest of this webinar and answering any questions that might come up and towards Homer that I can help with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. it's been my privilege to work with these men for a number of years. My own law enforcement career began in 1981 in Soldotna when I worked undercover narcotics with the state troopers. 82, I became a Soldotna police officer. 85, I was promoted to sergeant, and I worked in that position under various roles until the year 2000. In 2000, I left the Soldotna Police Department and became the chief of police in Kotzebue. I stayed there until I retired, which will be 19 years ago next month. I started consulting as a police consultant with AMLJIA and its members and other agencies around the state. I returned to law enforcement in 2018 and served as the chief of police briefly in Kotzebue, and then a longer stint in 2018 as chief of police in Whittier. All of that said, to reassure the folks in attendance that represented here on this question and answer time is literally decades and decades of law enforcement experience that is all diverse. And I'm grateful to the panelists and their willingness to answer the questions that have been posed before them. The first question that I would like to pose to the panelists, unless there are any particular questions that need to be brought before them from the floor right now. The first question that I would like to ask are, what are some of the challenges that you've personally experienced when addressing public safety issues in Alaska, especially in rural Alaska or communities that are not really on the road system like Seldovia? What are some of the challenges that you've personally experienced when ensuring these public safety issues? Sergeant Cox?
I guess I'll start. As I stated earlier, I've spent a lot of time in my career working in places where we police communities that are not on the road system, villages and places that we have to travel by air or ATV or boats to. One of the biggest challenges for us is travel, just getting to those locations. I've had cases where you get the call in the middle of the night, something's going on, and we can't travel. We can't get down there until the first plane flies in the morning and gets daylight. So we're doing a lot of stuff either over the telephone or trying to reach out to community members to try and alleviate some of the danger initially, get some safe places for people to go and that until we can get down there. So for us, especially as troopers, the travel is the biggest thing, and the time that it takes to get to the places, even on the road system. Anchor Point Post covers the highway south of Ninilchik. So we roughly have about 80 to 90 miles of roadway. And if I'm at the northern end of my patrol area, it could take me an hour and a half of driving just to get to the other end out in Voznesenka, one of our Russian communities. And that's a lot of driving every year. When I was in Cooper Landing, in 3 years' time, I put 115,000 miles on my patrol car. And that was a highway post. We were expected to be on the highway doing stuff. So just a lot of the travel, a lot of the vast areas that we have to police with a handful of people. Right now in Anchor Point, we have 5 troopers and myself assigned there. So we have 6 people total. One is out for a significant amount of time with an injury. We have another one that's transferring in. So the personnel movement. So just staffing and travel tend to be our 2 biggest issues. And it unfortunately causes a delay quite a bit on when and what we can respond to in a fairly timely manner. We take everything seriously. Serious crimes, we are on the phone and trying to get travel arrangements, trying to get over there as fast as we can. As far as our Anchor Point office, we've got the local air charters. The wildlife troopers have a vessel that we've used quite a bit to come over to some of our some of our off-road communities. And we're always reaching out and trying to increase our ability to get out through different means, but it's pretty limited as far as either planes or boats to get over to some of these communities.
Thank you, Sergeant Cox. Before I ask that same question of you, Chief, Sergeant Cox, could you explain just a little bit about your relationships with those communities or villages that may have some local law enforcement? How does that work?
Yes. We're partners with all of the law enforcement in the area. We have our area that we're responsible for, but we also respond and will assist local law enforcement. We work well with Seldovia, with Homer, state parks, our federal partners that when they request assistance, we try and provide as much help as we can, because as a whole, we're always there to support each other and back each other up. I don't think there's any agency in the area that's going to say that they're completely fully staffed to the best of their ability and they can respond to everything every time it comes into their dispatch center. So we assist each other as much as we can, and I think we have a good working relationship with all the agencies. Seldovia, especially because being a single person department, it can get kind of hairy sometimes, and of all the police chiefs and police officers that have worked in Seldovia I've worked with, we've always been there to help whenever there's a need.
Thank you. When you go into a community like a village that may be served by a VPSO and a VPO, do you rely on them for transportation around the community, getting to different places that you may be unfamiliar with and the like?
Yes, we're beholding a lot to the locals for transportation and assistance because we're not, unfortunately, we don't get a lot of time in the off-road communities, so we don't have vehicles or transportation once we get to the village. I've done a lot of walking from airports into the local communities with my backpack and my coat, and then I'm like, okay, now where do I go? Most places they don't have addresses that they're up there. Just everybody knows that, that's Billy's house or that's Thomas's house. And yeah, somebody where I live. Oh, I live next to Tommy, or I live next to the airport. That one we can get, that one we can kind of understand. There's the airport, which house, and then you find out there's 4 or 5 houses next to the airport, and then you just start knocking on doors. So yeah, we rely a lot on the local, either VPOs, VPSOs, police departments, and whoever is there as law enforcement to assist us. And if there's not any of those entities in town, then we start trying to make inroads, or we hopefully have had community members that are willing to assist us, and we ask for help from them.
Thank you, Sergeant Cox. Now transitioning to you, Chief Hawkins, you are in a community that, even though it is beautiful and modern and friendly and approachable and inviting and all the good things that I can think about Seldovia, you are certainly not on the road system and isolated and face its own challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've faced in addressing the public safety concerns in your community?
It's a little bit of what he's saying is when you come back into it, you're going in it by yourself. And with me, it's a one-man department. My backup, which is the troopers, and I rely heavily on them, could be a day away. I mean, if depending on weather and different things that happen, or longer, they could be quick, but most likely it's going to take a while. So I have to learn how to deal with the people one-on-one. That one-on-one thing is actually you've got to just, you got to go up and uphold the law, but at the same time, you're by yourself, and there's a lot of dangers involved with that when you're by yourself. It's a lot easier when you have people that are right there to help you, and sometimes you don't have that. And that's one thing that I've seen. But another thing is, coming from another state where I'm learning, is procedurals, and the laws here I'm having to learn that. I didn't have a training program that went in. It's like, here you go, and let's learn it. And I'm still learning. And it's, I love to learn the different things, and it's amazing. And I love Alaska. It's just got to learn the new style, new systems. But it's, a lot of it is the procedurals and being by yourself.
Thank you, Chief. Can you expand on that, as Sergeant Cox talked about working with the local agencies and relying on them for support? What kind of support do you provide, have you provided, or do you expect to provide to the Alaska State Troopers in their service over in this area?
You know, we rely on each other back and forth. I love the fact that I can give them a call and I can ask them questions. I had one of their troopers that was calling me about cases, and we were able to go back and forth. So I usually, it's a lot of the stuff will come first to me. And if it's more involved where it needs more of detective work, you know, we're able to get the information back and forth to each other. But if it's emergency and I'm going out, I'm the one that goes out and find out what's going on at first. But it's nice to have them and have that resource there. Plus, I think it's nice for them, because I've had once or twice where they've called me up and said, hey, can you go out and look at this, or can you go see this? And being over here where they don't have to come across, it's nice to have that working relationship. And I feel like that's what it is. We work really well together, and I've been able to contact Sergeant Cox and numerous other troopers if I've ever had questions, and they've been great to help me. And I hope that that's kind of what I can do for them too.
One of the misconceptions, or perhaps a perception that is not altogether understood by those that are raising this particular question. In Seldovia, you have what is considered inside the city. And I believe that is a responsibility of the Seldovia Police Department. Outside of the city is an area that is typically responded to by the Alaska State Troopers. Do those lines blur or blend, or how do you, Chief, handle calls for service that occur outside of the city? And I'm not talking about a call originating from the trooper saying, can you go out and take a look at it? But what if there is a call that you receive for an area that is outside of the city limits of Seldovia?
You know, that's a good question. And one thing we're working on, that's a new thing that we have been trying to work on, is trying to figure out who handles what kind of calls. But on most of them, the calls will come through, and I am the initial response on a lot of them, especially emergencies, unless it's something that can be taken care of, you know, that's like a property crime, something that's not really an emergency that happens right off. I go out and I'm the first one to respond. I like to, you know, there was that misconception of in city and out of the city thingy, and I don't really like that so much, as we're all Seldovians, but there is jurisdictional boundaries that we have to deal with, right? I mean, that's something that we're going to have anywhere. And we work through, that's just something we do. But I think to be able to work together where I go out and I will handle the initial, especially on emergencies, I handle it, find out all the information. And then if it needs to be passed on, I pass it on. If I need to take care of it, I take care of it there. That seems to be the way it's working now. And that's a new thing that we're working on with them.
Thank you, Chief. Sergeant Cox, could you speak to that same question?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add, other than there's the special services contract with the city of Seldovia, where the chief will handle certain items and certain investigations per the contract out in the outside city limits area. But it's kind of a new, or at least working out the logistics of it. Is we're still working on that and fine tuning it. The big thing is that, you know, if there's an emergency, somebody's going to go and somebody will be there. Who follows up with it and who actually investigates after the emergency part of it is taken care of. It's kind of where the fine tuning is happening, but that's just working between our two agencies and with the city, getting that worked out.
Thank you. Chief Hawkins identified an area that is of concern, or at least a unique circumstance here, in that he is the only officer of the Seldovia Police Department. There are some particular challenges that he faces that larger agencies would not particularly experience. How do the Alaska State Troopers support Seldovia's police chief to make sure that Seldovia is safe?
Well, as I talked a little bit earlier about, we respond to requests for assistance from any agency in our area. I've come over several times here to Seldovia since I've been stationed in Anchor Point after the local police chief called and said, hey, I need help with this case. We've got something going on I need assistance with. And we come right over as soon as we can. When the chief, in the times when the chief position has been vacant, or chief's been on leave or whatnot, we have come over and investigated cases in the city, just like we would anywhere else in our jurisdiction. But we're available anytime for Chief Hawkins, for him to call. In fact, he and I talk fairly regularly about things, and bounce questions and things off each other. And there's always Anchor Point's not staffed 24/7, but there is always a sergeant, usually a sergeant on duty, if not a trooper on duty in Soldotna 24/7. And if one of the Anchor Point troopers isn't on, or then there is somebody in Soldotna that he can talk to and run ideas through and ask questions with. As far as responding out here, there's been a few times when there's been myself and a Soldotna trooper that came down because the call needed more than just two people and that. So we provide whatever assistance we can based on the requests of the local agencies.
Thank you. Can you talk about agency assists when it's in your area? Specifically, if there was a case that was begun here and the investigation would go all the way over to Ninilchik or to Anchor Point, can the chief of police call and ask for assistance in that investigation, as far as interviewing maybe a suspect that's over there, or recovery of property that may be in the area? And if so, could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens actually quite a bit. I was just talking with Fairbanks Police Department 2 days ago about a case that is an overdue person that was overdue out of our area, but he last was known to be in Fairbanks. So I called the troopers up in Fairbanks and the Fairbanks Police Department trying to get any information. But we routinely receive requests from other agencies around the state for assistance in our area. If there's a suspect that's down here that needs interviewed, property that needs to be recovered, or even just witnesses that need to be identified and maybe interviewed, we try and provide whatever assistance we can, because there's going to be a time when we're going to need that assistance from them or their agency. And as a whole, law enforcement in Alaska, I think, works pretty well together for these matters, because people move all over the state. It's, for being such a big state, it's actually a fairly small state as far as people wise. And I've dealt with people in my capacity as a trooper in multiple posts, dealing with somebody in Kodiak, and then I transfer up to the valley, and then all of a sudden we're running into that person up in the valley, and I come down here, and now they're back down here in the valley, or not in the valley, but down here in Anchor Point. So people travel, evidence travels, cars all over the place. So yeah, anytime we need assistance, we don't hesitate to call, and we provide whatever assistance we can when we are on the receiving end of that call from another agency.
Thank you. This question is going to be addressed primarily to Chief Hawkins. You've been in Seldovia now for a year?
Yeah.
For a year.
Yes.
For a year
Roughly.
now. What are some of the misconceptions or misperceptions that you've encountered in the community without being attributing it to a specific group or individual or anything else like that? But can you speak to any kind of perceptions that you've encountered that you were able to provide information or updated statistics that might help correct those misperceptions? Are there any that come to your mind?
I think the biggest misconception with law enforcement, and you see this now as a trend that's going on, is when something comes in and it's a crime or something's happening, we don't go in and just automatically see the first person and just arrest them. We have to do a lot of investigation, and it takes a lot to know who is, right? And so I think it's the fast that people want arrest quick. And sometimes that takes a while. Sometimes it takes a while to find out the actual truth of the matter and learning the whole story. I can't come in and just arrest someone because someone points at them and says that person's guilty. I can't do that. I have to go in and do that. I think you see that now is where we're trying to be thorough and learn all the different things about the whole case, where it's almost now, it seems like a national trend they want it now. Everyone wants it now and they want action now. And if they don't get it, they're going to, they don't understand why. It seems to me that seems a big misconception is it takes a little bit of process to work through. Now, there are cases we do arrest people right off. We have evidence and we make the arrest right fast, but there are times it takes a little bit to gather evidence and learn what the whole case is. So we don't automatically just make arrests right off. That seems to be one that I've noticed. And I think it's interesting too. You see this, and like I say, I came from an area where there were riots going on, anti-police riots. We saw that. But there is one misconception about police officers, I think, is in order to do this job, we really have to care about people. We do care about everyone. Sometimes, I know it sounds hard, even those people that were arrested or they're protesting against us, we still are protecting their rights. We're there because we care about people. I think that's a misconception that we don't care, we don't like people. That's actually the opposite, I think. If we didn't, we wouldn't be able to do this job.
Thank you. Sergeant Cox, do you have anything to add to misconceptions that you've encountered in your career?
I'll piggyback on what Chief Hawkins says is it's almost an inverse relationship between the seriousness of the crime and the time it takes for resolution. If somebody steals a candy bar from the store, that's a pretty low, small thing. We can get the stuff that we need pretty quick. We can usually take action on that case pretty quickly. Somebody breaks into your house, steals a bunch of stuff, that's a little bit more serious. A homicide, that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of man hours to get a resolution, because we want the correct story to come out, the truth to come out, and we want to get as many facts and the evidence to come out and gather as we can, so that the appropriate people can be held accountable for their actions, because that's ultimately what we do. We're finders of fact. We go out and we gather evidence, we get statements from people, we try and make a coherent story and get a good picture of what actually happened, so that we can present it to the district attorney's office so that they can legally hold the people responsible for their actions. It was coined as what the CSI effect. All these TV shows, everything is solved within an hour with commercial breaks. One of the funniest things that I see on TV is DNA while you wait. They'll collect something up from the scene, and next thing you know, the next scene, they're back at the lab, and the lab is going, oh yeah, here's your DNA. This is the person, this is where they live at, and these are their fingerprints, and these are 18 of their closest relatives who have something to do with this. it's not like that. A quick turnaround to lab for us could be a month, could be, you know, some, especially with DNA. DNA was backlogged quite a bit. There was a case I was waiting for DNA for a year and a half. So some of that is, it's not that we don't want to make this stuff done and over quickly. It's, we just have to roll with the punches and gather everything that we can so that we can present the best case so that the appropriate people will be held accountable. And it is what it is. I wish we had all the people to do it like it is on TV and had the technology to do it. But our ultimate goal is resolution of that case, and holding the people responsible.
Thank you. Captain Hughes, I see you raised your hand.
I did. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Just a couple quick comments. It kind of goes back to some of the other questions, you know, response time, you know, that comes down to time, distance, weather, and manpower. Same thing with investigations. The severity of the crime, the prioritization of the crime also goes to how it's prioritized in the investigation. And a couple just short precepts. There's two sides to every story. You know, it's important for us to try to get both those sides, try to evaluate the information that it comes in. And then, as Sergeant Cox said, present the best case we can to the district attorney's office. Because ultimately what we think we know and what we can prove are always two different things. And it's what we can prove that we can take to the courts or take to the district attorney's office to now prosecute a crime. So just a couple short comments.
Thank you, Captain.
Real quick, as a follow-up too, is we don't want to prosecute somebody that is innocent. You have people making statements that so-and-so did it. But then we find evidence that they're not involved. So not only are we looking at evidence to determine who did it, we're looking at that evidence to determine who didn't, of the people involved.
Thank you. Another misconception is that it is the trooper's job and the police job to make the community safe. It's their job, their responsibility. We hired them. It's on them. And that ignores the role that the community has a role in making its community safe as well, members of the public. Could you tell me ways that a local community like Seldovia could partner with local law enforcement or the state troopers to make their community safe? Sometimes communities are at a loss as to how they can best help local law enforcement or state law enforcement to make their communities safe. Can you share ideas or suggestions on how the members of Seldovia, both inside and out the city, could partner with local law enforcement or the state troopers?
You know, this is kind of a complex question because you're wanting them to, how's the best way? And, you know, sure, I'd love to have them as backup officers and have me help me out and stuff. But no, really, the best way is just to watch the community, be out there and help. But also, I love the fact that I want them to get to know who I am. I heard a comment the other day and we kind of chuckled about it, but one of the mothers at the school was saying there was something going on with their little girl. And they said, well, if there's a problem, you can run to the police officer. I love that. That's exactly what I want them to do. If there's a problem, you come to me. I want to get to know them. I want them to know who I am. I mean, that's, you know, I want them to know who I am and come to me. I want them to know my name. I want them to come to me. And I've had that happen now where I've had even teenagers who naturally seem to have that fear of police officers who've come to me with problems. That's what I'm there for. So getting to know who your local law enforcement, teach your kids too also that we're here to help. Okay. One of the worst things I hated when I was a young officer, when I'd hear people would say, if you're going to be, they'd say to their kids, if you're bad, we're going to call the cops on you. We're going to call the cops. They're going to come over. And I would be like, that is the worst thing you could do. We want these kids to know we're there to help them. I'm there to help these, if there's something going bad, they can come to me at any time. So I want them to be able to know that I'm there for them. So get to know who I am, get to know your local law enforcement, talk to them, find out that we're just regular people that are out there trying to help out. I remember when I was started here in the community, I was driving down one of the local streets over here, and this lady stopped me like, what is going on? What are you like after someone here? And I'm like, no, I just want to drive up and down the road. I want I'm here. I want to make your community safe. And it was interesting that reaction she had, like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going to be. I'm part of your community. And near the end, I love the fact that I go by and she'll wave at me now. That's what I want, to get to know who I am, know that I'm available there for them. If they need help, know who I am, so that I can help them. I want to protect them, but at the same time, they have to be able to come to me. They have to watch out for their neighbors. There's a lot involved with this, but I think just getting to know your officer is a great one, especially in a community like this.
Thank you, Sergeant Cox.
One of the things that I see is communities are losing the in-personness, I guess is the best way to say it. Know your neighbors. When I grew up, I knew everybody that lived on my street. I knew all the kids, all the parents knew me. If I was doing something stupid in town, generally by the time I got home, my mom or dad would be sitting there going, okay, tell me about it. Because they already knew, because somebody had already called them. Technology has taken away the community aspect of people, the in-person community aspect. These phones and stuff and social media are a very great thing as far as technology, but they suck for people having interpersonal communication. Know your neighbor. That's the biggest thing. Know what's going on in your space, in your bubble, and you'll police your own area. And if we get enough people to do that, and again, not going out and acting as a police officer, but just know what's going on in and around your residence, in and around your neighborhood, in your town. We can't do it all. I wish we had enough people that we could solve all the problems, but we can't. And ultimately, we don't have the ability to solve all the issues that come up. We're law enforcement. We enforce the laws. The laws that are written by the legislature and put in, those are what we enforce. A lot of our responsibilities anymore are stuff that's not a crime, but we're getting called to settle neighbor disputes and different things that we don't have a mechanism to solve like we would a crime. If there's a crime and we can show who did it, we slap cuffs on that person, they go to jail. If the two neighbors are having a property dispute, it's not a crime. There's not much that we can do other than offer suggestions. But if people could regain that sense of community and the ability to talk to their neighbors and come to some type of consensus on a lot of these issues, I think a lot of the animosity that builds up would either not be there or would go away.
Even in idyllic communities like Seldovia, there are those that view it as a smorgasbord, a place full of victims where they can commit hideous acts or heinous acts, and they are not going to get caught by law enforcement. People know who the local drug dealers are. People know who the local bootleggers are, and yet they're hesitant to contact the police for being labeled a snitch or a rat. Are there programs locally on the peninsula? Do we have a Crime Stopper program where people can provide anonymous information? And if so, how can they reach that?
Yes, there are obviously Crime Stopper tips. The Crime Stopper line is open and anonymous. The troopers just started the 411 tips, which is fairly new, and I haven't dealt with it much at all, other than just an orientation. Maybe Captain Hughes can speak a little bit more to that. But again, that's an anonymous, it can be anonymous information source for us to gather information. And I believe it is, it can be text or email. So it's using some of the other communications systems that traditional ones maybe not using. But there are other ways. For us to address something, we generally have to have people that are willing to go to court and testify. For us to take action, we need backing. So if we get, if there's 18 witnesses to something and they're all not willing to testify or come forward, there's not much that we can do. We need the assistance of the community, and we need people to be brave enough to come forward and take a stand. And we get that. It takes a while, especially with drug cases. The larger drug cases take an extreme amount of time and manpower to put together. But when we are able to, we do see an immediate effect in the communities. It just takes people standing up and saying, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And the more people that do that, the tougher it is on people to victimize the community.
Thank you. Chief Hawkins, you talked about driving around and meeting some of the members of your community and building a relationship with them. And that obviously has had a positive impact on your community. This question is for both of you, and also for Captain Hughes or Chief Roble. Can you think of other programs that have been successful in the past to help bridge the relationship or build the relationship between public safety and the communities that they serve?
For me, the first place I go into generally when I'm new to a community is the school. I start talking with the kids. I spent lots of years teaching DARE in the schools, doing youth stuff. And so I spend a lot of time in the schools and in the villages and the towns that I go to when I have time. And usually from that, it broadens out. Once the kids accept you and you can get those inroads with the kids and get those relationships with the kids and the parents, you'll meet them out in somewhere, and the kids will come up and talk with you, and the parents will come talk with you. And as far as the troopers, unfortunately, we don't get out into our villages and again, off-road communities. We just typically call them villages, but it's our off-road communities as much as we would like to. And making those connections with the people is very important. It's how we get our information. It's how we get rides from the airport if we don't have a VPSO or a VPO. But it's also a way that we kind of gauge the community, what's going on in the community as a whole. They'll tell us stuff, and even stuff that has nothing to do with law enforcement. You get, some people that are having problems, mental health problems or substance abuse problems or housing issues. You'll get to find that stuff out, and normally we have inroads or at least communication with people that can try and help those people out. So we try and do a whole broad range of things other than law enforcement. We get into that, but the big thing is just getting in with the people, talking with the community members, and gaining some semblance of trust with them, and showing them that we're just people. We're community members just like you. Just our job is law enforcement, and it's really no different than the local librarian or the harbor master or somebody that's a commercial fisherman. That's our job. That's what we do. And underneath it all, we're just people, and we want the same things from the community and for the community that you do.
Thank you. Captain Hughes, I see you have your hand up.
I was going to make just again a couple just quick comments. both with what Chief Hawkins said and Sergeant Cox. So, and what we're talking about here is community policing. What Chief Hawkins talks about, being able to see people in the morning driving around, having coffee at the coffee shop. I mean, there's those kind of things, especially in a small community, are invaluable. The things you can pick up just by talking to people, not all criminal, but just little tidbits of information, you know, little gold nuggets that you can pick up. And the same thing's true for the community, to have those discussions with the chief when they see him out and about. But again, that's just another name for it, is community policing, having the community involved with local law enforcement. One of the other things that, and some of this could be used in the community, there's neighborhood watch programs for local areas where, and again, it goes back to what Sergeant Cox was talking about, having community members meeting with each other and watching out for each other, their property, you know, for thefts, you know, strange people hanging around their property, just things going on in their neighborhood. And having meetings like this, I'm not saying necessarily on a regular basis with everybody, but having those communities and those neighborhoods getting together and just talking about things that they see in their community, inviting the chief over, and they can have those conversations so he knows what's going on in those neighborhoods. Sergeant Cox brought up about the school. That's another thing that I know in a lot of our areas, trooper areas in rural communities, that you know, we try to attend a lot of the sporting events in our schools, trying to get some of that information and meeting people and being out and about. Again, it's community policing and having the community interacting with your police officers.
Thank you, Captain. Chief, did you want to speak to that?
You know, when I first came here, I brought up the community policing, community orienting, and our city manager asked me to speak at one of the city council meetings about it and how it could help this community. And I'm just going to echo what they've said, because they've hit it right on the nail right on the head, especially Sergeant Cox when he said about the kids. I think it's great to start there. That's what I started when I came here. One of the first things I went to on school. I'm there every morning. I want the kids to know who I am. Get to know the kids, and then get to know the neighbor. I love to drive through the town and have people stop. As I was going to pick Sergeant Cox up and Greg, as I was heading over, I got stopped 3 times. I loved it. Loved the fact that I could have people stop and just talk to me, just chat with me. I want them to know who I'm there. That's what I'm there for. You know what? If they want to talk, I'm there to listen. It's, you know what, you just got to be part of that community any way you can help. I also like, for me, in this small community, I come to the city council meetings. I mean, sometimes they put me to sleep, but I'm there every time. It's kind of a joke, but no, I'm there at all of them. And I do support them, and I don't have to be there, but I'm there to support the city. I'm there for the city. I want there for the citizens. I'm there to help out any way I can.
Thank you. And one of the problems about communicating with a mask is you don't get to see the smile. I saw this smile when you said you fell asleep. I saw that. All right. Chief Roble.
Yes. Thank you, Greg. You know, I just wanted to stress how important that face-to-face interaction between police officers and citizens really is. So many times we find out that people know so many things about what's been going on in their neighborhood, and they're just hesitant to bring it to our attention for whatever reason. And I would encourage folks to contact us and don't assume that we know what they know. You know, please keep us informed the best you can. And when you see that officer drive by past your house, don't hesitate to wave us down. We really want to talk to you. We really want to hear what you have to say. We really want to know what you're seeing out there. That helps us tremendously to do our jobs and to help keep you safe. I get frustrated sometimes when, you know, someone finally calls us and says, well, why aren't you guys doing anything about this? The whole neighborhood's been talking about it. Well, nobody called us. And we don't know everything. We need you to help us do our jobs. That's just a comment I wanted to make. Thanks.
And Greg, I would just add to that, sometimes we don't say anything because we have an ongoing investigation and we can't or shouldn't.
Thank you to you both. That is very important, is to realize that many times information is requested from the community. And it would be nice if we could share, but you can't because of confidentiality concerns, or you want to maintain the integrity of an investigation. And so you have to deliberately withhold information. And that is so frustrating to the public, especially maybe to a family member or to a particular victim of a crime, when they would like to know what is actually being done. And that answer cannot be provided at that particular time or as quickly as they would like to receive it. There's quite a bit in a national narrative right now about defunding the police and getting rid of them because they're so evil and mean and bad, and they do terrible things. And that has got quite a bit of publicity. But some of the other programs that law enforcement is involved in doesn't really get much publicity at all. And I'm talking about some of the programs that have already been mentioned, the DARE program, the Shop with a Cop, the turkey raising events, or the Special Olympic fundraisers and events and other things like that, that law enforcement gets involved with. Law enforcement sees a lot of things that the general public, I'm glad to say, don't have to see. They see danger, crisis, people in circumstances at their absolute worst. Does that have an effect on, and it's an obvious answer, but would you care to speak to the effect that sometimes the caustic part of the job has on the individual officer or the department? And just in general terms.
You know, what was I think it was Nietzsche that wrote, you know, if you stare into the abyss stares into you. You can't be subjected to negative and bad things every single day for years and years on end and not have it take a toll on you. And the people who do this career for a long time and say that the stuff that we see on a day-to-day basis doesn't affect them are either liars or psychopaths. And I don't think we have many psychopaths working, at least in Alaska, that I know of. Everybody that I've worked with has been caring individuals. So yeah, and again, we're just people. Sometimes we have bad days. Are there times when we're not 100% and our moods suck and we get fed up with everything too? Absolutely. But the end all be all is that we are trying to help and make a difference and do what we can to help the community be as safe as possible. But it does take a toll on us. And again, being just people, some days we have bad days too. And it, you know, we try and do as best as we can, but I guess, you know, some days it gets to us also.
You know, as law enforcement, it's interesting because in those same people that are going to go out and you hear this defund police, these rioters that we're out there at the times, and we saw it when I was there in Utah. We're protecting their rights to protest against us. You think that doesn't affect us? You think it doesn't affect us that we see these things over and over? We're seeing some of the worst people. We're not called usually when people are having a good day. We're not called over usually for the birthdays. We're called over when people are at their worst. The worst things that are happening. And you think it doesn't affect us? And then later, how it affects our family? Of course, we're people. You know, we're really good at times. Sometimes, I don't know how you would say it, maybe compartmentalizing or just saying I'm forgetting about it. And I used to be good at that when my wife would come and say, what happened today? And I'd be like, I can't even remember. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? We do remember a lot of that stuff and it does come back later. So it does affect you. We're people. If we didn't care about people, maybe it wouldn't affect us as much, but we do. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things is we do care about people. And so when we see these things, the negativity, the bad things that are happening in society, and we do get to see it. We get to see it all. It does affect us, and it's hard on us, and it's hard on our families. But we you know what? That's where we do care about people. That's why we do this job.
And one of the big things for me that makes me realize I chose the right profession and that people actually support us is just the little things, the little waves as I'm driving down the highway, or hey, how you doing, troop? Everything going good? Yeah, no problem. How about you? Just the little things that we probably should be doing with all of our community members. But I remember as a young trooper in Palmer, I was used to a certain response from the community, and then I transferred to Kodiak, and the people driving by waved with all 5 fingers, and it was amazing. Just the little bit of interest from the community, just enough to wave hi as you're driving down the road, counteracted a lot of the negativity that we encounter every day in our job. Just those little bit of positivity is a huge counteract to that negativity.
Thank you. And I suppose it's something that might be doing, or even present might be thinking as well. Officers, troopers, you signed up for this job, quit your whining, buck it up. But the reality is that what you've just shared with us is honest and open and revealing. Thank you for sharing that. And you've also shared some examples of how a community can demonstrate its support for their police department, often in a time of crisis that affects a local community, and the police are involved. Beyond the waving, I've actually seen communities hold up signs, "We love our cops," or not defund, defend, or do some other token of appreciation for the job that you do. And sometimes it is as simple as saying thank you, and how far that goes towards easing the difficulty associated with your job. So Sergeant Cox, Chief Hawkins, thank you for sharing all of that. When the citizens, the community members, are going to leave this meeting, or they dial off of their Zoom meeting, what is the one thing that you hope that they take away from having spent this little over an hour and coming up on an hour and a half with you answering these prepared questions? What do you hope would be the takeaway from those that are hearing this information being shared today?
I hope they understand that we really do care about the people. We're trying our best to do but we're people, that we make mistakes too. But we're trying our best to do what we can to serve them. And even if sometimes it feels like it's not happening as fast as they want or what they're doing, we are doing our best and we're trying. We are here for them. That's why we do the job, is we're wanting to help other people. You don't get a lot of money doing law enforcement, and you get a lot of other stuff. So you must have to care about the people to do it. That's all I can think about.
Sergeant Cox?
I think along with what Chief Hawkins says, is there just needs to be a respect between everybody. Regardless of whether you support me as law enforcement, you don't support me, or parts of it or whatever, I respect your ideas. I respect you as a person, and I'm willing to talk with you, and we can exchange ideas. When we stop communicating as a community, as people, we lose a lot of that ability to solve problems. When nobody's willing to talk about something or respect each other's opinions or beliefs or whatever, we lose a part of our community, a part of ourselves that we can't sustain without. So there's got to be some civility and some respect in every encounter and every interaction that we have, for us to be able to move forward as community members and as people.
Thank you, Captain Hughes. What would you like to have a takeaway from this time together, please?
Again, just a couple quick comments. I'm going to piggyback on Sergeant Cox in this one. You know, a lot of what we do is problem solve. You know, it's not always criminal and things we deal with, but ultimately the thing to take away from this is about communication. You know, I go back to community policing, but it's being able to have a dialogue, being able to interact. We as law enforcement officers aren't going to be able to solve all problems. We need the community to assist us in solving problems, determining who has done illicit things. We can't do that by ourselves. I mean, we can do a part of it, we can do a function of it, but we can't do it without the community. And community policing is about working within and with the community. And if there's a big takeaway, I think that's it. What we do, we have to do in conjunction with the community. We aren't everywhere at all times, so we don't see all crimes. And a lot of what we do is reactive, not proactive. We have times when we can be proactive, but in most cases, we are reactive. People are telling us things that have happened already, and now we go out and start to investigate. So.
Thank you, Captain.
And one quick thing, I just throw this out real quick. Sergeant Cox mentioned our new tip line. This actually went live last month, I should say end of August. And you can get the app from Google Play Store or iTunes App Store, or from the Department of Public Safety Alaska gov.tips website. And it's the name of it again is AK Tips, capital AK Tips, and that's the app you're looking for. It's an anonymous tips. When you sign into it, put the information in that you want to provide. It wipes all your information before it's moved on to law enforcement. So there's no way for us to know who's providing the tips. It's not set up or established as an alternative to 911. If there's an emergency that you want to report, please continue to call 911, as that's the appropriate course of action for emergencies.
Thank you, Captain. Good information. Chief Roble, before I move on to audience participation, are there any takeaways that you would hope would be the result of this town hall meeting?
Yeah, thank you. I echo. I especially want to reinforce the comments about communications. Effective two-way communications between law enforcement and the public are simply critical to maintaining a high degree of public safety in the community. We cannot do it without the citizens. Their input makes us much more effective and will really help us to improve their safety. So please talk to us, please communicate with us. Let us know what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what we can do to help make your lives better and make your community safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to transition to opening up audience participation at this time. And I see that if you raise your hand, then someone will be able to answer your question. And I would hope that as your questions are being directed toward one or all of the panelists, that the questions hopefully would be geared along the idea of what can be done to improve the trust or to reestablish or rebuild a relationship between the community and public safety. Can you make the next one live?
Yes. So, Mr. Rustle, to start, we have Miss Kate Holman-Billmeyer.
Hello, Kate. Welcome. Thank you. What is your question?
Hi. Yeah, I want to thank you all for taking the opportunity to have this town hall and appreciate all the panelists being here. I hear what you're saying about community policing, and I agree. I think that's a framework that is important. And I also hear what you're saying about respect, but I just want to point out that that's a two-way street. I want to acknowledge that this summer here in Seldovia, there's been a divide between city and non-city in terms of public safety. Whether that divide is real or perceived, it's real in its consequences, right? So I'd like to know what some ideas are out there for repairing that perceived divide in terms of public safety. And how do you think about local opportunities for reconnection and trust building between all residents in Seldovia, not just folks that live in the city, but folks that live outside of the city, and opportunities for connecting with them in multiple ways and through multiple modalities. I don't think that it's enough to expect people to just come knock on the door. That puts all of the onus on citizens, and there are a lot of proactive citizens in this community. So how do we find ways for local police to get into the community when we don't have basketball games or things like that? It's not enough just to sit kind of at the cross section and watch kids go to school. It's appreciated, but how are ways that there are opportunities for law enforcement and citizens to interact in authentic and productive ways in Seldovia? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and I'll go back on mute. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. What an excellent question. I appreciate you asking that. As we've tried to demonstrate in just the context of this town hall meeting, is there is a partnership not only in the public safety community between law enforcement agencies, the troopers, Seldovia and Homer, but a partnership, a desired partnership within the communities that go, well, even beyond boundaries in city and out of city as well. Having a conversation like this or a follow-up conversation on ways to make meaningful interaction between law enforcement and the community is certainly an agenda item that I hope would be followed up on. Captain Hughes, I saw that you raised your hand. And what I would like is that, because I see that we've got a couple other hands that are going to be raised or are raised. If you could answer that question, please.
I like to at least address some of it. So, I was talking about community policing and how are there ways that we could get together? And just like right now, we're having a community meeting. It's within the city limits of Seldovia. That doesn't mean we as Alaska State Troopers can't do the same thing if a meeting were to be organized for outside the city limits to answer maybe the same questions, to look how we can better assimilate with the community, how we could, as I mentioned, maybe have neighborhood watches that we could meet on a regular basis, once a quarter, once every other month, whatever the case may be. So there are those venues, and just like you brought up, Kate, it's a two-way street, and we both have to reach out. So if that's something that the community would like to continue to do or to start to do or look at doing, we're certainly open to those type of suggestions.
There's also national organizations that are addressing the same topic. The relationship between communities and law enforcement has been fractured. And sometimes that fracture is just a little bit, or sometimes there's a great divide. And organizations outside of public safety are working to restore it because they realize the value that public safety provides to its community, the protections. It's a relationship that is worth working at having. Next month, one of the national organizations that I'm aware of that's reaching out is called Faith and Blue. And the Cordova Police Department is an Alaska agency that's going to be participating in that. And this was a brainchild of someone in Lower America that realized that they could do more to support the wellness of the officers. And they came up with this program. They brought it up here to Alaska. We viewed it, offered it out to many of the different organizations, and Cordova stepped up, and they're going to be taking part in it. It's called Faith and Blue. There's other community outreach programs where they try to restore this relationship. For instance, a national night out to where the neighborhoods will have like a block party and invite a member of the agencies to come and be a part of that. Recently, a friend of mine who is still a law enforcement officer had to go to a particularly dangerous call. The dangerous call was a man that was totally distraught and had made up his mind that life was no longer worth living and was going to create a circumstance where the police officer was going to end his life. It was called suicide by cop. And the officer that showed up was immediately recognized by this man as the officer that had gone to school and had taught a DARE class. And rather than continue with that line of thinking, he said, "You're the officer that taught my kid DARE." And the relationship that had been extended way over here had a downstream effect in this crisis, and it was resolved peaceably without the disastrous outcome that the man had originally intended. The relationship between an agency and the community is extremely vital. There's a myriad of programs like what Captain Hughes just suggested of having another meeting reaching a different audience, maybe with the same questions, with the same presenters or different panelists, and get this discussion talking about to try and restore this relationship that is definitely worth preserving and not allow those that would desire to fracture it to succeed. There was another question there for Laurel.
And kind of another local answer for Kate, for the Anchor Point troopers, is that we're kind of triaging every day. Every day we come on, there's stuff pending there in that. And if there's an event going on in Seldovia that you would like a trooper to attend, please let us know. We will do everything we can to come out and be part of it. We just unfortunately don't have the time to keep looking and searching out things to do and go and that. But if there's a community gathering or something where hey, we'd like to have a trooper over here, even if this just to say hi or that, please let us know. We will make every effort to get over here and attend, because we do enjoy meeting the communities, and most of us do enjoy the travel outside of our normal driving in our patrol cars to calls, and we like to see the communities that we serve and meet the people that are in those communities.
Thank you. Laurel?
Yes, we have a Miss Laurel Hiltz.
Hi, Laurel. What's your question?
Hi, Mr. Russell. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I should be appearing on screen. I'm seeing my picture, but I just appreciate everybody taking the time to come and have give this presentation today, and to hear the perspective of the different agencies and individuals that are working in these roles of providing law enforcement. And as the presentations were going on, I made a number of notes. And so my attempt is to kind of bring it all together in my thinking so that maybe we can have a takeaway that can support the process. But some of the things that I noticed was that it does seem that there's a perception issue that's taking place, and that there's also some misconceptions that exist. So starting from the point of that calls that are outside of the city of Seldovia, so those calls which originate from the Seldovia village area, that those calls, Greg, in one of your questions, you said that they're typically responded by the troopers, and Chief Hawkins corrected that. So making it really clear that the precedent that's been in place for many years, and I guess I would say for understanding of me, I'm a Seldovian of 5 decades, and we know that in 3 of those decades we had one officer, and so, but then we've had a couple decades without that one officer. So it's not new to us to have different people in that role. But what we have seen is maybe a misconception of what the policing is for Seldovia, and a misconception maybe of the institutional knowledge that does exist in the community of why contracts exist, how they were manifested. And so with that, you've got a lot of folks that understand why the contracts were created for the local chief of police to enforce on behalf of the state troopers, and why that expectation has been there. It's not a new conversation. What is new is that the framework inside of the city of Seldovia for law enforcement is changing, and it's changing with each new iteration of chief of police. And so with that, it's a matter of public perception from the community, but also public relations from the city government itself. And so what we're running into, and I would say that I'm confused that this is a meeting about community members getting in line with supporting law enforcement, because I think if you sat down and talked to a whole lot of people in this community, they really do support law enforcement and hope for success. And my other thing I guess I wanted to say is that I really appreciated the conversation about community policing, but again, I'm really surprised that it's a new concept in this conversation, because the model here has been community policing for my lifetime, and again, 5 decades plus. So with that, and I just, one last piece before I give you my final thought. One last piece is that we talked about technology and the concerns of social media, and I will be the first to tell you that I use social media for communicating in Seldovia on a regular basis, and I use it especially through my job and through our local Facebook group to support people in their knowledge and understanding of circumstances that affect them, especially in regards to preparedness for emergencies. And so I think I would caution us that we stay away from a concept, and we've even heard from our city mayor that people shouldn't speak on social media to express complaints unless they want to provide the solutions. And I would caution our city government from that language and thinking, and encourage people to be able to have open dialogue. And so just so we understand, Seldovia's had cell phones for a while. We've had dial phones, we've had landlines, rotary phones, and CBs and VHF radios, and communication has flown forever, whether or not it's over those devices or certainly on a regular basis. We're seeing each other at the store, at the grocery store, at the post office, and at a restaurant, etc. So I'm surprised at the concept that the community is not actively engaging in discussion, because that's happening on a regular basis. But because that's not something that you all are aware of, I would encourage the city government, and this, I guess, was my question, would the city government be willing to host or facilitate opportunities to gather together the 5 government agencies that exist in this community: city, borough, state, federal, and tribe, as well as all of those different volunteer organizations and people who are actively providing community services here in Seldovia: educators, businesses, churches, libraries, etc. Because in addition to you all being involved in law enforcement, a major piece of your work is that of community service, obviously. And the community relations, I think, would be strengthened by hearing the institutional and historical knowledge of the locals. And my last piece is that in order to live in the utopia that is Seldovia, you have to have resilience. And that resilience comes from us banding together. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Laurel. I appreciate your comments. And my takeaway from your input on there is how valuable information is to overcome misconceptions or misperceptions. And I'm glad that we can count on you and so many others to help get the right information out there. Thank you, Laurel. I do appreciate that. Are any of the panelists have a comment that they would like to make before we move on?
Yeah, real quick. I hope my comment about social media wasn't taken the wrong way. It's not that social media isn't effective. It is a very effective way to get information out, and it's a great way to keep in contact with other people and reach a mass audience. I guess the point that I wanted to make is, don't let that be the only way that you connect with other people. Have that interpersonal communication with people, the face-to-face, meeting at the grocery store, meeting at the post office. Let technology enhance that, not replace that type of communications.
Go ahead, Chief.
Just to go on with that, the social media is just, we got to be careful too. It's a great resource out there and it's good, but we've got to be careful on what's put out there too, and what we believe is what is true and what is not, what's fact and what's, fiction. So we just got to be careful on that, because you can put anything down. And sometimes what we're talking about earlier is sometimes it's just waiting for the full facts to come out is always a good thing. And sometimes that isn't always put out. So it's a great resource to get out and talk. And it's good to know all that information. I agree. We just got to be careful on how we do it.
Thank you, Chief. This question is for those in the audience here, or those of you that are still with us on Zoom. What do you wish the police officers or the state troopers would keep in mind when they work with you or other members of the public? What do you think is important for them to know, to hear from you about what is important that they should keep in mind when dealing with the public? Okay, we have one member here.
Thank you. We have a Miss Vivian Rojas.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. And if I may, I wanted to comment about the earlier statements. And that is, earlier on when we all started, 2 comments were made between Officer Cox and our chief of police. And that was that we're working on the issue of the state trooper contract that we have. And truly, I don't know if we'd be sitting here today if there wasn't the confusion and maybe the misrepresentation of how that contract works. I've lived here since 1974. And so I think I liked what I heard, that and I think most of the public would love to hear, what is it we're doing to move forward? Because the confusion comes up about, we have a policeman for the city limits, but we also have the contract with the Alaska State Troopers, and our chief of police helps them out. What are we doing to alleviate the question our state trooper or our chief of police has about when he should respond, when he shouldn't respond? And this issue came up, I can't remember, with city council. I'm also on city council, some years ago, about the contract that we had. And the contract, the city of Seldovia asked during budget time for an increase of $5,000 to help us out. And that stirred the pot a little bit to figure out, well, city of Seldovia is doing too much. And then, okay, what should we do and what shouldn't we be doing? So I think that's the confusion right now. So moving forward, I think would help our chief of police and to know, and the community in Seldovia and out of Seldovia, what are we doing moving forward to eliminate the confusion? That would help our chief of police, I believe. And so I like the dialogue I heard. I don't know if maybe another visit we could have would be, what are we doing, Officer Cox, moving forward to try to help eliminate the confusion? Did I make myself understandable?
No, I understand the gist of your comments. I know when I first got down here, the contract between the city and the state, whatever it said, it was basically understood that if there was something that happened out in the outside city limits, the chief would handle it. And whether the contract said that, or if that was just kind of whatever, that was the expectation, that was the reality up until recently. As far as the contractual issues, I'm not involved in the actual contract. It's Captain Hughes and other people in the department are a little higher. What I'm involved in with Chief Hawkins and Captain Hughes is trying to figure out the language of the contract into reality. If this type of incident happens, who's going to respond and deal with what? So it's taking the broad contract and getting the day-to-day nuts and bolts figured out so that everybody's on the same sheet of music. And that's what we're working with, and I'm trying to work with Chief Hawkins. Ultimately, it comes down to anything outside city limits is the responsibility of the Alaska State Troopers. The contract is now an agreement between the city of Seldovia and the state to police that area with the chief for certain circumstances. And that's what we're trying to do now, is define exactly from the contract, the broad strokes into the nuts and bolts things of, if this happens, then the troopers will come out and investigate, or is it something that the chief's going to go out and respond to and possibly investigate, or is he just going to go out, make sure the emergency is over with, and then the troopers are going to come out? Those are the details that we're trying to work out between the two agencies and the two governments. And once that's down, it's going to be a work in progress, but once it's kind of settled down into a more concrete form, it will be, we'll try and get that information out to the public as much as we can, so that there's the full understanding of what's going on. And we've been working on it, and I think we've come to a fairly decent working thing. But again, some of those nuts and bolts still need to be worked out and solidified.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Seldovia has always very much appreciated the troopers and our chief of police here. And so I just want to compliment you all for being here today and the answers that we've had. And I think this is a great discussion that's happened. And I think, as Laurel said earlier, that Seldovia has always been right next to our chief of police, whoever that may have been. When my kids were growing up, I knew what they were doing before they got home, and it still exists. But I appreciate your time. And that answered my question beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you. Captain Hughes, your hand is raised.
I guess I just wanted to clarify a couple things. I mean, the nuts and bolts sometimes may be difficult to work out, but really the language in the contract calls for the chief to look at emergency criminal investigations. That's really the big ones. And the key to there is emergency. And again, I know we spoke to the council before, what constitutes an emergency, and that sometimes is one of those hinge points. The other things that were in the contract were related to search and rescue, process service from the court, potential prisoner movements if someone was arrested in Seldovia, whether in the city or outside, transporting that individual over to Homer. There was some information there about intelligence gathering for other investigations. And then one of the, I guess, key ones is that Sergeant Cox and Chief Hawkins would be working out would be those other things that fall outside of the things I mentioned earlier. So there may be something that happens outside the city that Sergeant Cox has been contacted over, or even Chief Hawkins initially. And then there's this discussion between the two of them of whether or not the troopers request that Chief Hawkins goes out and looks into an event that is not classified as an emergency criminal investigation. And then the other thing I would throw out there too is there is some language in there about traffic enforcement, but that pretty much is specific to someone that might be driving under the influence or reported to be driving under the influence. I hope that maybe cleared up some more of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. And I appreciate your question. And I'm glad to hear that you got the answer that you needed to hear. Around the state, the demand for public safety it's felt in every community. And some of the communities are so remote and so isolated and have such a limited population that they have to rely on their local village police officer to help meet that particular need. That person has been identified in the community and hired by the community to help resolve smaller issues, but also is given the speed dial so that they can call the state troopers. And hopefully they can call the state troopers and the state troopers will show up. The next tier of law enforcement is called Village Public Safety Officer. So in Alaska, you actually have 3 tiers. The lowest level of enforcement is provided by a village police officer. The next level above that is Village Public Safety Officer. More trained, more screened, more equipped, and able to handle a higher level of police calls in their local community. But still, it's being resolved at the local issue, and the troopers will still have to respond for crimes of violence, serious felonies, and such like that. The next step above that is your certified officers, of which your troopers and your municipal police officers typically serve. Seldovia has the good fortune of having a fully certified, well-trained police officer that's providing the level of service of the protection here. That is part of the reason why the troopers are able to be so comfortable in asking for good help from Chief Hawkins. He's able to provide that. Seldovia, in my humble opinion, is fortunate to have a certified officer in the police department here. Not all communities that I visit or I have the privilege of working with have that level of proficiency and credibility. Working with the state troopers, like what you're trying to work out, is a common, frequent challenge of the communities. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking with somebody like Homer or Soldotna or Kenai or Seward, Palmer, Wasilla. There are times when police or when the troopers are pulled so far out of pocket that they rely on good quality help from other officers. They're even authorized by state law to be able to summons help. I need help. And when they make that request, then you're duty bound, you're legally bound to provide that help to help a trooper. You just can't ignore it. So the conversations that Seldovia is having right now to address this particular issue is common and timely. And I'm glad that you were able to attend this meeting today to ask these kinds of questions and hopefully get the information that you need to have. Laurel was exactly right. There are some misconceptions and there are misperceptions that can only be overcome with the release of and the acceptance of timely information. The people that have been on this panel today, Chief Mark Roble from Homer, Captain Mo Hughes from the Alaska State Troopers, Sergeant Dan Cox with the Troopers, and Chief Clayton Hawkins are subject matter experts. They're on the front lines and they're dealing with these particular issues day in and day out. Their commitment to public safety and to the well-being of you as an individual, as a community, and as a state are without question. They exemplify the nobility of the profession. They are worth defending. They are worth supporting. They have a difficult job to do, and they're willing to do what we ask of them, sometimes at great personal expense. I hold these men and women of public safety in Alaska generally in very high regard. And I'm very glad that they took time out of their day to meet with all of you, answer your questions, and hopefully disseminate some information that you can take away from and say, this was time well spent. The city will take this meeting and it'll be shared on the city website. It'll be shared on YouTube, and it'll also be shared on Facebook. If there is someone that didn't get to hear it, you have at least these venues for them to play it back and hopefully get some answers. Now, will one meeting solve the whole problem? Probably not. If it did, then we just play this for somebody else who also has the problem, right? It's going to take multiple meetings. It's going to take a commitment from everybody involved to ask the tough questions and maybe get some pretty tough answers to deal with. The answers that have been provided to the questions that have been asked are truthful. You can rely on them. And if there is more questions that you have as an individual, then please feel free to reach out to Captain Hughes, Sergeant Cox, Chief Hawkins, Chief Roble, or myself, and ask those questions. We may not be able to give you the answer that you are hoping for, but we certainly will do our best to give you the information as we can. We're about ready to wrap up our time. The allotted time is fast upon us. But before I do, I want to give each one of our panelists one opportunity to give us in less than a minute Any final comments? And I'd like to begin first off with the panel right here. Sergeant Cox, please.
Well, I think discussion is always a good thing. We're always open to talking with people and getting everybody's ideas and your vision of what you want your community to be and how we can help that within the framework of what we can do. And again, we're part of the community. We want as much as you for the community to be safe, for everybody to have the opportunities to fulfill whatever, their life goals are. And we want the communities to succeed as much as you do.
Thank you, Chief Hawkins.
Back again, we do really care about the community. That's why we're here. This is brought up a lot because of this new, well, it's not even new, but the contract, how we're working through these new problems that have come up with it. And just know that we're doing our best. And I am in constant contact with Sergeant Cox, and he's calling me, and I've had their other troopers. We do make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I'm a person. No, we're doing our best, though, to try to do what we can to help out the community.
Thank you. Chief Roble, do you have any closing comments for us?
Yes. So I'm anyone that lives anywhere. I don't care about political boundaries. If I'm someone you want to talk to for some reason, please give me a call. Our admin number at the police department in Homer is 235-3150. You can also contact me through our Facebook page. At least I can listen. I might not be able to help everyone, but I guarantee you I can direct you to the right law enforcement agency or person that can help you with your problem.
Thank you, Chief Roble. Captain Hughes?
Yes, sir. Well, I want to say thanks again for having us. I think having these community meetings are a good thing, to maybe change some perceptions or try to answer questions that folks have. Doing it on a regular basis it is a good thing. And maybe as was pointed out earlier, maybe having a joint meeting for folks from outside of the city of Seldovia, as well as folks that live within the city, having a joint meeting, have a discussion, and perhaps even some of our other partners. It's a community event. It's a community issue, and we are here to serve the community. I'd also like to say, same thing for me, if you have questions that I can answer, my office number through dispatch is 907-262-4453. And I'm available to have any further discussion. If someone has some specific issues they'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out and give me a call. Thanks again to the City Council for having us, and thank you all.
Thank you, Captain. We couldn't have a meeting like this without the coordination of everybody's schedule and the effort that was brought about by Rachel. Thank you, City Manager of Seldovia, for all of your effort in making this time together a reality. Thank you to the City of Seldovia. Thank you for your hard work and keeping us like we really knew what we were doing here when it comes to technology. That was outstanding. I certainly appreciate that. Rachel, did you have any comments that you needed to make before we close? None? Okay. Then I would like to thank everybody in attendance, and we will be adjourned. Thank you.